My name is Jack Marchetti. I'm a writer, director, and I'm here to talk to you about the camera I chose to use on my last film, which was also my first film, The Evolution of a Gen X Music Purchaser. The camera we shot on was a Red Epic. We shot in 5K and we used Red Pro Prime lenses. I will preface my remarks right now by saying that if you know a lot about lenses, a lot about cameras, if you're like a camera hobbyist and you know a ton about them and things along those lines, this is not the video for you. This is more for people like myself from 2 years ago who, first time director, hadn't really been on a set before, never really messed around with cameras, and didn't really know a thing or two about the difference between a Red or an Alexa or what you can do with a DSLR, even shooting on an iPhone, or aspect ratios and things along those lines. So like I said, we decided to shoot with a Red Epic. One of the reasons why I wanted to shoot on a Red Epic was I had heard about it. I knew that David Fincher used them. I liked the look of David Fincher films. And so I wanted my film to look like a movie. We all talk about the film look and what that is. And I just thought, you need the camera to do that. And it turns out it's not really the camera that determines the film look. It helps, but it's about frame selection. It's about the lenses. It's about the story. And if you properly frame something in your iPhone, it's going to look like a movie. I kind of want to talk to you about the benefits of shooting on a Red Epic. Like I said, we shot in 5K, which is a huge amount of resolution. It's massive. And the big benefit of doing that I found was we were able to reframe some shots in post-production. I don't recommend doing this. You should frame correctly on set. You should have your shot list all set out, which we did. However, when we got into post, there were a few shots that we just ran out of time on. When you look back at them, a month later, they just didn't look right. This shot here, we were running out of time. This was our last night of shooting. I think we had about 10 minutes left, and this was the last thing we did. And we set up the camera in the rear window, passenger side window, and shot this. And it's a very simple thing. However, this right here is the exact same shot. We're just punched in about 200%. So this is the actual thing we shot, which is fine. But I wanted to punch in a little bit on him for a close-up, and there's the close-up. It's the exact same shot. This is just done in post-production. If you were to do this correctly on set with the proper lenses, the background probably would have looked a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, like I said, who cares? We did this again on this shot right here. So this is the altered, this is the reframe shot. This right here is what we actually shot. This is us punched in. And we're punched in, I think, maybe 100, 200% while still maintaining 1080p. We also did this similar approach on this shot. Now, I'll admit right now that this is just poorly framed. I don't actually have an example of the wide shot that we started from in the film. If we were planning on shooting it like this, we would have probably changed the camera angle, changed the lenses, and it would have looked a lot differently. But again, in post, when we're shooting at such high res, you're really able to mess around with things like that. Another thing that's a benefit that you can't get on, let's say if you shot on an iPhone or something like that, if you were going that low tech, you're not going to be able to get something like this. To see how the background is all out of focus. This is called a shallow depth of field, and you need a longer lens to pull this off. And so another benefit that I don't really have a before and after to show you, but when you shoot at such high resolution, you are able to, if you have a colorist on board, they have almost an unlimited ability to manipulate the image that you've created because you've provided them with so much detail. Each frame of a Red Epic is the equivalent of shooting, I think, like a 14.4 megapixel still shot. So you have an enormous amount of data to manipulate and work with. So I didn't really find anything negative about working with a Red. I had heard that they're very loud and we were shooting in some places that were actually open for business, like a record store, and I was really worried about this thing sounding like a hairdryer. But it actually, we didn't have any problems with that at all. One thing we did run into was we wanted to use a movie stabilizer. However, there's a weight limit on that, and our Red with the Red Pro Prime lenses would have exceeded the weight limit, so we weren't able to use the Movi. If I could go back 2 years to when we shot the film, I would probably tell my more inexperienced self to not get hung up on the camera. I got really set on we needed to use a pro-grade camera, professional camera, and I hammered that point home. But then you get into editing, and you realize it, maybe you're missing story, or maybe the sound didn't work out, or whatever. You're not at all worried about what camera you used or things along those lines. At least I wasn't. When we were in the editing bay and putting everything together, the last thing I was worried about was the camera. I was more worried about, like, did we get enough coverage of certain scenes, which we didn't? Did the story make sense? We had professional sound on set, so the sound was great. And I would say, if you're putting your budget together and you have money for sound or money for the camera, shoot on your iPhone and pay someone to record sound. The sound is going to make your film. If your movie looks like shit but sounds great, people are going to assume it looks like shit because you wanted it to look like shit as an aesthetic reason. If it looks amazing and sounds terrible, people are just going to assume you suck and you have no idea what you're doing. And no one's going to think, oh, that was shot on a Red Epic or an Alexa. Look at those skin tones. No one's going to give a fuck. They just aren't. And so in conclusion, I would definitely use a Red Epic again. I'd have no problem with it again. I would just say that I would not get hung up on the camera. On my next project, if my DP says, look, let's shoot on an iPhone, let's shoot on a 5D or a 7D or whatever, let's shoot on an Alexa, I don't really care anymore, because to me the camera doesn't really matter. And if I were to leave you with anything, and hopefully you come away with anything from this, just realize the camera really doesn't matter. Do they have benefits? Absolutely. But if you frame correctly, light correctly, you still have to light correctly, and have it sound well, the camera will be the absolute least of your worries.